video of the girls in case they don't show up when I'm getting ready. I'm making my tea now, but they're going out in the world. See, I don't know if you can hear my water. Oops. Good morning. I'm here with the girls. They're fighting over a stick. Well, of course, they're not fighting anymore. Pearl's posing. Maisie, are you going to pose? No, but they're out here with me. It's almost cool out here. Oh my gosh, I look like a... I look like a professor, you know, one of those wild professor types. I look like Einstein. I don't look like Einstein, but you know what I mean. Oh well, I'm gonna try not to fuss with my hair today. Good morning, I'm Barbara. It is Saturday again. Oh my gosh. August 15th. If August, girls, earthquake. If August has an Ides, it might be today. Ides of August. I jokingly in March said, oh, it's the Ides of March on March, no, not March, April. April 15th, I said, oh, it's the Ides of April, thinking, you know, like the Ides of March is March 15th. But it turns out the Ides of April was the 13th or something. It turns out there's more than one Ides. I thought it was just a day in March. So it's possible it's the Ides of August. It's possible it's not. My daughter, the medievalist, will let me know. Oh, big news on the daughter front. She's doing a Flosstube. She sent me a link to her Flosstube last night. I was watching Flosstube at like 11 o'clock. She did such a good job. So I will put a link to her Flosstube. Her Flosstube channel, her channel on YouTube is called Kristi's Corner, Kristi's Corner. Oh, I'll put it right here too. But I'll put a link to her Flosstube down below if you have any interest in Flosstube. She does such a good job on her first Flosstube. I was so proud of her. She is not a cross stitcher. She does freehand embroidery, and I love what she does. Anyway, I suggest you go watch her because I thought she was amazing. It's true I'm her mother, but you will be able to judge for yourself. But I thought she did a great job. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to it. So I guess she's planning right now. She's planning on doing one every Friday. Well, when I started my podcast, I was podcasting every week. For 6 months I did it. And then I realized the thing about doing it every week, and I didn't give her this advice, but I guess I will. Well, maybe I'm giving it to her now. Maybe she's watching. It's hard to have enough actual crafted content on a weekly podcast when it's only one person. When you have, you know, there are lots of podcasts that are more than one person, and so that helps to have content. But I found that my weekly podcast was really, I stopped doing it weekly and started doing it every other week because it started to really affect, doing the podcast was really having a huge effect on what I was deciding to do with my crafting in a way that made the crafting less fun. So, Kristi, if you're watching, I forgot about that last night. So a weekly podcast to start, because you have lots to show, because she's been doing, she's actually pretty prolific with her embroidery. Certainly more prolific than I am with my cross stitch, for sure. But it inspired me to start working on the neckband of my sweater so that I could do my podcast, so I could promote her podcast on my podcast. You know, that's what we do. And speaking of promoting podcasts, now I'm forgetting who told me. I'm so sorry. Codi Knits. It was a podcast that I don't follow, What a sweet man. Codi Knits, Codiknits. If you're looking for it on YouTube, put it in as 2 words because I had trouble finding him. He was doing a kind of a pay it forward and asked for suggestions of podcasters who were kind of helping people through the COVID times, and because he wanted to give them a prize, and he picked me. You guys nominated me, and when I watched that on his podcast last night, I got teary-eyed, and I'm getting teary-eyed now just thinking about it. That is so sweet. I am so glad that we're helping each other through this COVID, and for you to nominate me was so lovely. And now I got to figure out how to get in touch with him, because he showed the prizes on his latest podcast, which was up, you know, the last couple days, and the beautiful yarn. He wants to give me beautiful yarn, and I'm so honored. Anyway, that was so sweet. What a wonderful thing, and what a sweet guy. So I have seen his podcast quite a long time ago, and I thought I was subscribed to it, but apparently not, because I had to resubscribe. And but what a sweet gentleman. I know he's a nurse, you know, so here he is, you know, thinking about, well, who's helping you through COVID, and he's a nurse. I'm sure he's helping plenty of people through COVID. So he was on vacation, so that was nice. But I don't even have words. It was such a sweet thing, and it was a sweet thing to be nominated by you guys, and it was a sweet thing for him to do. And anyway, I'm just can't tell you how lovely that is. Really. Thank you. And thank you, Codi. What a sweet thing to do. Oh, COVID. OMG. Okay, so my knee is back to day 1. I am so unhappy with my knee. Well, it's kind of a good news, bad news story. The bad news is my knee's really bad. It's been clicking and paining me just like it did the first week. Like, I never recovered from it, which I thought I had. I'll admit, I thought I had. So that's the bad news. The good news is I think I figured out what happened, and Dennis agrees. Because, you know, walking up one step wasn't it. And wearing my sandals for 5 minutes wasn't it. It was vacuuming. I vacuumed. The good news is I'm not going to be vacuuming anymore. Bad news for the rug. Good news for me, though. Dennis, Pearl. She's barking at Maisie. Maisie's prowling around the perimeter, guarding the perimeter. Pearl, stop barking at you. She was. Now she's just making noise. Pearl. Yeah, we know you're a big, tough girl. We know. Excuse me while I yell at my dog. Dennis brought many things into this marriage, and one of them was a Kirby vacuum cleaner. Now, Dennis and I have been married 28 years. This Kirby vacuum cleaner is probably going to last our entire lifetime. And it's a great vacuum. It works great. It is so heavy. It is so heavy. It takes a lot of energy to use. And okay, that's enough. And that's what it was. I vacuumed yesterday. And vacuuming, you know, you turn, you whatever, but it didn't hurt me right at, okay, that's enough, Mace. That's enough. No, she's got a cold nose. And I'm a little chilly. You know, when you're vacuuming, you're moving around and whatever, and schlepping this, you know. It was the vacuuming that did it. Totally set me back weeks. I'm so unhappy about that. So back to my first week routine. take my meds without fail, ice it several times a day, back in my sneakers. Of course, I was back in my sneakers within 5 minutes. Seriously, I was back in my sneakers already. So I'm so annoyed with my knee. But I really don't want to talk about it. Oh, and I slept last night, and I didn't take any Benadryl, and I just slept, and it was so nice. It was so nice. So there's some good news, too. I'm full of good news. I don't have to vacuum anymore, and I slept. Just some cute little silver and turquoise earrings that I have. It's fun to put on new earrings every day, I have to say, because they don't all have a story. These have no story other than who can resist turquoise and silver. I found, I keep finding earrings that I have no memory of. That's how many earrings I have. That's how many earrings I have. So, when last our heroine was on her vacation in Jordan, I just say before we go to Jordan, I did tell you. I started on my neckband. I worked on my boxy. I started on my neckband. And I decided to do the broken seed stitch on the neckband. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to do that, bind it off, finish it up, and see how I feel about it. I thought it was going to be fabulous. I'm not sure it's fabulous, but I'm not sure I hate it. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about it, but it's only, it's not that big. So we shall see. I don't have enough. I don't know if I have enough yarn to do something like an actual collar. A friend of mine posted a picture of her mother. Beautiful picture of her mother, obviously from the 50s. It might have been like her graduation picture from high school or college. Early 60s. And she was wearing a sweater with a little rounded collar on it, just like that. It was a textured sweater and it had this little rounded collar on it. I thought, I've never knit a collar like that on a sweater. And now that I'm doing this broken seed stitch, which is a double-sided stitch pattern, it looks great on both the front and the back, although now that I say that, that's not true because it's a broken seed stitch. Anyway, suddenly thinking about making a collar. So I did that. Played some poker. I won in my poker, so I helped build in a tiny little tournament. I helped build my bankroll up just a little bit, so I didn't, I just got a notice, farmer's market. Saturday, farmer's market. I can never remember, so I put a notice on my calendar. Which is now annoying me. Excuse me while I flip it up. So anyway, so that was nice. I enjoyed that poker. And I was going to read and then I didn't read. Oh, I did read a little bit, but it was a cookbook. I was reading like the introduction to a cookbook. So, anyway. So, Jordan. So we were in Jordan. We went to Amman, and I told you about the Blue Mosque. And Amman has a huge, huge Roman amphitheater that they have excavated. And we've been a lot of places, and I'm trying to think if this is a story in Amman or if it's a different story. Anyway, there's a big Roman amphitheater in Amman that's been excavated, and so you can go and climb around it, and you know, the whole seats, I mean, they've uncovered the whole thing, so they have this big amphitheater around, and it's one of these cool places, like if you whisper in this corner, you can hear it all the way on the other side, kind of thing going on, you know. So that was fun. We were there for quite a while, and if you look out from the, you know, the bench seats across Amman, you can see on the other side of the city there's a hill, and on the top of the hill is like a super ancient wall that has been exposed for all this time, and you know, so I think it must be Roman too, or maybe before Roman, I'm not sure. A really old wall. But it's kind of, you know, but when you're up high, you can see, you know, Amman. And one of the cool things about Amman is that there are lots of people who keep pigeons, and they have flocks of pigeons. They have pigeon cots on their roofs, and Ibrahim has pigeons, and they fly their pigeons. And I don't know if you've seen that. There are people in New York City who do that too, and they fly their pigeons around, and they, you know, it's really interesting. And I guess those are all male pigeons, and they keep a female back on the roof, and that's why they all come back. I'm not sure how that exactly works, but you can sit up there in the amphitheater and see flocks of pigeons. You know, it's like fireworks across the city, and there, you know, these flocks of pigeons flying around. It was really cool. And in fact, Ibrahim took us to a pigeon market, and so they had lots of pigeons in cages, but they were the most amazing looking birds. I mean, if you saw this bird in the wild, you wouldn't even realize it was a pigeon necessarily. I mean, they had pigeon bodies, but they had, you know, and they were obviously male because they were quite ornate with all their feathers and everything. So that makes sense. So I think I'm right about they keep a female so that all the males come back. But this pigeon market was crazy. Like, you know, every cage was more amazing than the next cage, and people bought them for their flocks, and they weren't cheap. I don't know, where do you find those? I mean, I don't know where you capture like super exotic pigeons like that, although I probably can raise pigeons in the wild. I mean, you know, domestically, I would assume. So I suppose somebody was breeding them, and they weren't just capturing wild pigeons, but I guess I don't really know. But that was fun. I mean, that was you know, and I'm quite sure the other 3 groups who were sort of in tandem with us, I bet they didn't go to the pigeon market. And that's one of the cool things about overseas adventure travel. I mean, your group leader is a local person who has a local life, and so can take you to you know, their places they know. And in fact, we were walking around the city, and he, you know, Ibrahim was a very outgoing guy, as you can imagine. You know, you don't do that job if you're not really an outgoing guy. And he just stopped a man on the corner of the street and introduced himself, and you know, called him his cousin. He wasn't his cousin. He never met him before, you know, and asked him about his life, and would he mind talking to us and, you know, answering our questions or telling us about himself. You know, it was, you know, they'll just do that. It was very interesting. I'm gonna tell you about some interesting walks we had in, I guess it must have been Quito, because my friend Linda was with us, and she went on that trip. That was the Galapagos trip. But anyway, that's another story for another day. So Ibrahim took us to one of the little kind of hole-in-the-wall restaurants that he eats at all the time. It's a local restaurant. It's not, you know, it is not, I don't have a tourist book for Amman, but I would be shocked if this was in there. But it was in, you know, downtown Amman. But it was a little tiny, skinny, but it was long. So it had, you know, quite a few tables in it. They were like picnic tables, you know, benches and stuff like that. And we were 20 people, 21, 22 people. But they could take us. Across the street from this was an interesting... It had an international restaurant / bar, like on the second floor, and you could see the balcony, and people were all sitting up there, and you know, there was like flags from every country hanging off the balcony across the way. It was very interesting. But so he took us into this restaurant and said, you know, sit anywhere, sit with, you know, if there's room at a table, you can sit there, even if there are other people at the table, you know, and don't, you know, that's how it works. Don't worry about it. And so Dennis and I sat down, you know, with another couple who were sitting there, and they were, you know, smiled and said, sure, of course, you know. Most of the other people in our group sat at empty tables, so they all sat with themselves, but we were sitting with this couple. His name was Ahmed, and we could not remember his wife's name, and I feel so bad about that. He was from Jerusalem, and she was from Tunisia? I'm not sure. Maybe Tunisia. And he spoke perfect English. She spoke a little bit of English. I think she was understanding us. She didn't speak very much, but I think she was following the conversation really well. And they had their food in front of them, and we ordered, you know, whatever the local, you know, regular lunch was that people were ordering. And they said, oh, here, try it, you know. And so he was feeding us his food, you know. So you take a flatbread and you put a French fry on it, and then you put this and that and that, and it's like a bite-sized thing, and you eat it. And so he was showing us how to do it and how to eat it and whatever. And this was before our food came. He was feeding us off of his plate, and they were so lovely, and it was really, really wonderful just to have this conversation. He, you know, he gave me his phone number for WhatsApp, and he had contacted me, but I had never used WhatsApp before, and I didn't even know that he contacted me until like 2 weeks later. And by that time, you know, I apologized and said, oh, I'm so sorry, but I didn't hear back from him, and that was my fault. He was like, okay, she blew me off, you know, and I felt terrible, but it didn't notify me that anybody had called, you know, texted me on WhatsApp, and it wasn't in my head. And anyway, we didn't get home for a few. I felt terrible. I contacted him as soon as I realized he had contacted me. I called him back and apologized and asked him how he was, but he didn't respond. So, which was too bad. I felt really bad about that. What a jerky Americans. But anyway, we had the best time at that lunch. And you know, he was you know, essentially a refugee from Jerusalem, who had, you know, wasn't comfortable living in Jerusalem now, and so he was in Amman with his wife, and you know. And they were so friendly and nice, feeding us, showing us how to eat the food, because, you know, it's not always obvious the best way to eat the food. But that was one of the highlights of the trip was, you know, that lunch. It was really, really lovely. And what else about Amman? So we drove around, and you know, we saw the sights, and dropped his daughter off not far from where he lived. Oh, the other thing, after lunch we walked around and we went to talk about a little, you know, hole in the wall. It was literally, you know, you went and got your food out a window and came back and ate. And we got kanafa, C-A-N-A-F-E-H, kanafa, which is a dessert, and it's a kind of a cheese. It's like layers of maybe like very thin pastries, and filled with cheese in between the layers with nuts and stuff. Very sweet. The pastry's soaked in syrup, and you know, this is a super, super, super sweet dessert. But it gets cut into squares about that big, and you know, you get it in a bowl because it's syrupy and sweet, and you know, eat it on the street. So we're all standing around eating this kanaffel, which was really, really good. Pure sugar, so bad for you, but it was delicious. We were not doing keto at the time. So we're sitting around talking, and I told you that the vice president of Southern Europe and the Middle East for OAT was on the first part of our trip. Her name was Shannon Levy. And so we're all sitting around, and we're saying, you know, telling Shannon, I was telling Shannon that we booked this trip because of the 3 days in Egypt, that I thought we were never going to be able to go to Egypt, and so that's why we were on this trip. And I said, you know, I would love to sail up the Nile. You need to put a trip in sailing up the Nile. She looked at me, she said, we just did. We just added a trip sailing up the Nile onto our itinerary. I'm like, foreshadowing, because I told you I didn't buy those Eye of Horus earrings on this trip. So we were so excited. We actually, when we got back to the movement pick, we booked for the next fall, because that was also only the next year in the fall, and so we booked for the next fall while we were in Jordan to go sail up the Nile. And Shannon was very nice, but she left the trip, I think she left the trip like the next day after, when we were heading from Amman and the Dead Sea area. We were heading south, and she left us there. I guess she flew out from Amman. But the thing about Jordan was I knew nothing about Jordan. And, you know, I told you, we were on this trip because we had 3 days in Egypt. And as an extra added attraction, we got Israel and Jordan in my book, because the whole point was the Egypt part. And I guess they were worried that people wouldn't be interested and might be concerned and be a little leery about taking the trip, because when we booked this trip, they included airfare. Like, the airfare was free to the Middle East. And, you know, I think they were surprised because they got a lot of people who wanted to do this trip. I don't think anybody got free airfare after us. I think we were like the second or third group to do this trip. And you know, they got some good feedback from the first group that did it, and so they made a couple changes that I was glad that they made. But anyway, so that was our visit to Amman. And I think I started to say, I didn't know anything about Jordan before we booked this trip. I had I had heard of Queen Noor, but I didn't know anything about Jordan at all. I didn't even know about Petra. That's how ignorant I was about Jordan. So, you know, talk about a clean slate coming in with no preconceived ideas. I mean, I obviously looked up Petra before I left on my trip. But when I booked it, I had no idea. And anyway, so we left the Amman area on a luxury bus the bus had the best Wi-Fi. So we're sitting on the bus uploading to, you know, Instagram and Facebook, and the bus had great Wi-Fi. It was very comfy. It was only 20 of us on this bus. And, you know, it was one of these big giant buses, so we each got our own double seat, and it was really comfy. This was our first encounter with tourist police. One thing that we had in the Arab Middle East, not in Israel, but in the Arab Middle East, were tourist police, and we had a tourist policeman on our bus the whole time we were on the bus. So we had an armed guard on our bus. There was never 1 minute, just to put it out there, you know, while we were in Jordan, that we felt the least nervous. Not 1 minute. And not because we had a tourist policeman on our bus. Totally fine, lovely. The people were glad to see us, everybody. I do have to say, and I have found this in everywhere that we've gone, that I really appreciate the fact that the people of the world in general, at least the ones we come across, of course, you know, we're tourists and we're coming across people who interact with tourists, and so they're going to be more open to tourists and Americans, but we haven't found anyone who blamed us as Americans for our government and what our government does. They recognize the difference between the people of the United States and the government of the United States. And I have to say that I am very grateful for that. Very grateful for that. So anyway, we left the Amman/Dead Sea area on our luxury bus, and we headed south. And we drove for a few hours, and I'll tell you all about our southern Jordan adventures another day. But if you don't know anything about Petra, check it out. Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's a little hint. Petra's the cool place, man. But I'm not sure you'll get the whole idea about Petra, even if you read about it, because I read about it and I was shocked. So I will let you go and take my girls in and start editing this, because I'm on 24 minutes and this is like the second piece of the video because of Barky Dog. So again, long. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad if you lasted this long and you're enjoying the travel log, thank you. I'm glad. And thank you for joining me on this Corona journey and listening and being my community. I really appreciate it. And I hope you are well. I hope everyone is healthy and well and doing fine. Doing as well as possible. And I will see you tomorrow. Please stay safe and stay safe.